Greetings, this is Tariq X with National Network View. On tonight's broadcast, NNV weekly contributor Nina Shabzz will be joined by Regional Student Minister Abdul Haleem Muhammad as they discuss urban planning in Houston. Brother Abdul will talk with us about the Florida Department of Education's proposed curriculum changes on the teaching civics in history. Contributor Netfa Freeman with Black Alliance for Peace gives insight on U.S. President Biden's comments during the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa race massacre and explains the implications of his administration's policies towards the African world. Before we get into those top news, let's do a recap of the current events we've covered recently. NNV News anchor Rosalind Parks was joined by weekly contributor Brian E. Muhammad, who expounded on the catastrophic damage left by Israeli airstrikes of Palestinian-occupied territories.
After 11 days of Israeli airstrikes and bombardment, the Palestinian occupied territories, including the West Bank and Gaza, have been decimated. What types of infrastructures have been damaged or destroyed by the airstrikes?
Well, all civilian infrastructure. We're talking hospitals, schools, Palestinian residences, businesses, and even the offices, which usually the media is off limits to these things, but the offices of Al Jazeera, as well as the Associated Press, were destroyed. According to many of the analysts who are doing these assessments afterwards and looking at the level of destruction, they're saying it's going to take literally years, for these things to be rebuilt and for the city to come back, the cities to come back.
Brian E. Muhammad also gave more information to Rosalind about the conflict as they discussed the lopsided death tolls of 300 Palestinians to 12 Israelis and the Biden administration's unwavering allegiance to Israel through its billions of dollars in financial and military aid.
Nearly 300 Palestinians have been killed, as we discussed briefly in the last segment, and a dozen Israelis killed. Why is the death toll so unequal?
Because Israel have been given the weapons of America. Israel also have devalued Palestinian life. And when you have no value for the next human being, then you will stop at nothing. You don't care about the numbers. You don't care about the lopsidedness of how you respond. In Islam, we don't believe in just turning the other cheek. The Holy Quran allowed for retaliation under circumstances. But the Holy Quran also balances that by not allowing us to exceed the limits, even in warfare. So if you kill 10 of mine, I'm not allowed to kill 30 of yours.
Vernon Muhammad updated us on what's new on the blockchain, the changing financial global situation, and financial education.
And what do these movements mean for the existing global financial systems?
What we see going on in several different areas, you see a shift. You think of America and how much of a powerhouse it has been over the years. Well, there's a struggle for dominance now. If you look at China, if you look at the European Union, you look at some other developing nations, everyone is realizing that, hey, since 1971 at least, we've been dependent on the US dollar. What you're starting to see now is different countries are starting to maneuver themselves so that they can establish their own dominance. And as things move from just the physical US dollar to digital currency, you have more people taking advantage. You have more nations and institutions taking advantage of blockchain, taking advantage of Bitcoin, Ethereum, as well as, like China is doing, their own central bank issued digital currency.
NNV News anchor Rosalind Parks spoke with weekly contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad on the recent lawsuit filed by employees at Methodist Hospital in Houston, Texas, and its relation to violations of the Nuremberg Code.
What is your view of the suit that the Methodist employees have penned against their employer?
I noticed that there was an aura in Methodist that they considered themselves one of the best And I would agree with that. They are probably one of the best in the medical center. But I'm saying that because the confidence and the aura that the employees of an institution have is a large part of the success of that institution. And I think it's very interesting that the pro-vaccine ideology calls everybody else, lead-headed. They're not open-minded. But in reality, if you have people that work in the healthcare field and have been doing so for many years, and there are a certain percentage right now, there are estimates from 50 to 60% of the healthcare workers across the country are either against or very concerned about getting the vaccine. Why would that not be taken in consideration?
The numbers of adverse reactions and deaths associated with the COVID-19 vaccines, along with the accuracy of the VAERS reporting system, also came up in Rosalind's conversation with Dr. Akili.
Dr. Akili, what are your thoughts on the data that has been recently reported stating that 70% of Californians have had their first shot? And according to the CDC, 50% of Americans have been fully vaccinated.
When the vaccines were first being introduced to the society and when they were supposedly being made in these companies and they were about ready to be sent out to the public, there was a huge concern on how millions of people were going to get vaccinated. The system doesn't have the capability to do that. And so when we look at the fact that we have been vaccinating people since December, 50% of America is approximately 170 million people. And we have to understand that J&J was kind of behind the Moderna and the Pfizer. Mm-hmm. And then there was a period of time where they suspended it, right? So we're talking about a lot more people that are taking the vaccine that necessitate 2 shots. So we're really talking about a lot of manpower, a lot of vaccinations that it would take to vaccinate 170 people.
Dr. Akili addressed the concerns over the youth now being added to COVID-19 vaccination trials and the risks of administering COVID-19 vaccines to children.
Children as young as 6 months are being selected for COVID vaccination trials. Is this safe?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there has been enough time for us to truly understand and come to a conclusion on what's happening in adults. And of course, as most people have seen within this last month, it's been approved for, 12 to 15 year range. So for them to already have dropped the number to 6 months, and then again, it hasn't been approved yet for approval, it's still in the emergency use phase. It just really doesn't make a lot of sense to me because the generation that's lower than 15 didn't really have a lot of cases. It really wasn't a large population that was having a lot of struggles with the COVID infection.
On a special broadcast, NNV News anchor Willie Muhammad highlighted the 64 years of the ministry of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Student Minister Tariq Muhammad, a member of the NOI research team, discussed this milestone and helped highlight the impact the minister has made throughout the years.
So, Brother Tariq, it was actually you who brought this idea to me to have this show, and you, from your research, discovered this is the 64th anniversary of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan being a minister. So, why is it significant for us to highlight this milestone in his life?
Minister Willie, I think that this is a great occasion for us in the Nation of Islam and as a people. For when you go throughout Black America, and quite frankly, the world, all you have to do is say 2 words, the minister, and one man comes to mind. And that is, of course, our beloved teacher, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So he has worn a moniker or a title for 64 years. And that is a word that defines a servant. Some dictionaries say a minister is a servant to a king.
Social media strategist for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, Kiyan Muhammad spoke on how the trials the minister overcame throughout the years helped to shape his ministry, as well as the reach his ministry has around the world within this social media era, and much more with Willie Muhammad.
How have the trials of Minister Farrakhan helped to shape his ministry?
You know, the minister was asked that question via Twitter, and he said it helped to build his character. And the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad told him that he would never teach another minister like he taught Brother Malcolm until he has thoroughly tried him. So when you look at how the minister was tried and tested, and the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad told him, you know, during a very heated moment, I believe it was December 1974, when he told him, he said, brother, when you want to test the strength of a board, you put it at the corner and put a lot of pressure on it. And if it breaks, you throw it away and then find you another one. So at every turn, the messenger was letting them know that he was being tested, because the messenger in 1954 had prayed for a little help.
Student Minister Nuri Muhammad discussed the correlation between the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's life and that of King David and Apostle Paul. He also touched on the impact that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's wife, Mother Khadijah Farrakhan, and his mother have had on him.
How would you say that his wife, Mother Khadijah Farrakhan, and his mother have impacted and shaped the 64-year ministry of our minister, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan?
Wow. Simply put, the minister called Mother Khadijah the wind beneath his wings. Wow. And when he said it, I've heard him say it 4 times. And I thought about that, Brother Willie, I thought about that verse in the Holy Quran where Allah talks about what happens to a brother or sister when they meet the truth from the Messiah. And in the Nuruddin translation, it says that you are taught the Torah, the gospel. You're taught the book and the wisdom. You're taught what foods to eat. And it says in the Nuruddin, and you put on wings and become a flyer.
Historian and NOI archivist student Minister Carlos Muhammad broke down the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's tireless teaching that cemented his position in the hearts of the Black community and the influence Malcolm X had on his ministry.
What is it about the ministry of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan that continues to cement his position in the heart of the Black community as it took place also in New York during that time?
When we look at 1970s Harlem, we're talking about the Mecca of Black America at that time in New York City. But we were also at the height of the opioid or heroin epidemic, or cities like York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, all up down the East Coast and throughout the country, but specifically in Harlem. And so in the midst of that type of situation where the scourge of heroin was so heavy, but yet the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad coming from his national representative, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, was transforming the lives of those.
Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. Afterwards, Nina Shabzz will join us with her guest, Student Minister Abdul Haleem Muhammad, to discuss the recent developments in urban planning in Houston, Texas. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom made from recycled copper from the messenger's home is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with NNVnews.com.
As urban planning helps anticipate the future needs of the community in metropolitan areas, urban revitalization and sustainability can be achieved.
In city after city, this is the new reality. Streets closed down to traffic, parking spots turned into outdoor dining. But for some, these changes are triggering a moment of reckoning, and Dr. Destiny Thomas is on the front lines.
So for you, that speed hump,
it represents so much. It's an act of atonement.
For Dr. Thomas, there's more to a road than meets the eye.
This speed hump suggests that someone took the time to go to every house on this block. It's a transportation feature that requires civic engagement in order to exist.
She says the key to helping a community is by engaging directly with its residents, hearing their needs. For example, to many, adding a bike lane may seem like a big help.
In a community that hasn't seen any kind of commitment, investment, or anyone leaning into the overall well-being of the community, the bike lane is a telltale sign that cost of living is going up and that we're approaching displacement.
You don't want to change something so much that then other people come in and displace the residents.
And the way you avoid that is by bringing community along every step of the way and implementing it in a way that matches the values and cultural construct of the community.
Joining us for this topic is our weekly contributor, Nina Shabzz Muhammad, who invited on a special guest, Student Minister Abdul Haleem Muhammad, to help us gain more insight on this topic. Greetings.
Greetings. How are you this evening?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. How about yourselves?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
So Minister Abdul Haleem, I know that Houston is either they're doing everything right now or everything wrong. And so we see that the influx of business industries, we see a lot of titans of industry moving their corporations. Elon Musk moving Tesla to Houston. Why is Houston so hot right now, in your assessment?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for inviting me on the program. But Houston still remains the petrochemical energy capital of the world. This also is the home of the Johnson Space Center, the largest medical center in the world. And in the Austin, San Antonio area, the hill country as it's called, it's now been transformed into the Silicon Hills, led basically by Dell Industries, and of course the universities and private and public investment. There are low corporate taxes here. There's no state income tax here in Texas. Texas is a right to work state, meaning you don't have to belong to a union in order to work in certain industries. It's a deregulated industry. Actually, this state is anti-federalist, and that's why we had a power grid failure, because we disconnected from the federal grid and from federal regulations. Private property here in Texas is sacrosanct, it's holy. And of course, this is a largely, believe it or not, an agricultural state. And we have one of the busiest ports in the whole world in the port of Houston. We also have a trade in the Mexican border. And of course, the Dallas-Fort Worth area is a distribution point for certain south central portion of the United States.
Wow. So you mentioned that it was that Houston is a petrol, or Texas is a petrol and agricultural state. So what would you advise a young person to get as a skill or industry?
Well, I would first and foremost, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan also confirms this. There are two particular things I'd like us to look at. One is, of course, agriculture, especially food supply, the chain logistics. Okay, not just to be the farmer, but how do you process the food? How do you package the food? How do you transport the food? And how do you get it from the field to the meal? But the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that engineering is the basis of nation building. So all of the engineering skills should be open to us. And of course, the pure and applied sciences, medicine, healthcare, security, and emergency management is necessary, particularly in the fall of America. We should learn all the construction trades. We should go back and learn the blue collar trades, but we also should get into the green collar trades, which includes energy, renewable energy and solar paneling and things of that nature. And then also what I like to call the silicone collar trades, such as blockchain technology, coding, robotics, and microprocessing. These are some of the things we need to really look into also. And don't let me forget finance and education. Can't leave that out. But we should really steer away from the social sciences per se, because we've got a lot of liberal arts degrees and they really not making enough money to support yourself, particularly in the economy as it is. And we need to go to those things that are going to be about nation building so we can build an independent existence for ourselves.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. All of those things and then some. One of the things that I wanted to ask you as an urban planner, we know that there is, global warming is real. We see that Hurricane Harvey devastated Houston a few years back. And so as we're developing, as city centers are getting larger, as industries are moving in, jobs, population growth is burgeoning in most cities. What, as an urban planner, do you see that we should be thinking about in the future in terms of what should we really be anticipating as it relates to global warming and that sort of thing and climate change?
Well, as you know, Sister Nina, in my dissertation, in my studies, I attacked, if you will, the concept of sustainable development, which is trying to bring equilibrium between the economy, the environment, and social equity. And so in a post 9/11, post Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Harvey planning environment, we have to add security in a 9/11 environment, asymmetrical warfare. Now we see cyber warfare is going on. We have to add that to our mix of sustainability. And also we have to put safety, public safety, such as mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery as part of our sustainable development model. Because in truth, yes, global warming, the fall of America, the judgment by the elements of rain, hail, snow, earthquake, and other things, we need to really be prepared for those calamities that are to come. But the most important thing for those who particularly live in the urban areas is the mitigation of gentrification. We should always welcome development, but we want equitable development without displacement. The very definition of gentrification is a neighborhood change that causes displacement. And the only way to solve that is to be a student of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teaching and what his number one chief minister has taught us. We got to own some of this earth we can call our own. You can't stop or mitigate gentrification if you don't own the dirt that's under your feet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you spoke on, what it is that could be coming to Houston, what we need to be doing in order to prepare, for certain disasters that could be coming with the fall of America. And so what projects are you working on that you're most excited about?
Well, I'm working on multimodal transportation. Houston is like, in some senses, is a very auto-centric city. And they do believe in highway building. And we're very far behind. We're nearly 30 years behind in terms of mass transit. So one project I'm working on is the extension of what is called our Purple Line, our light rail Purple Line out to Hobby Airport, which is a smaller international airport. Also, the expansion of I-45 is going to cause great displacement in terms of housing and businesses, and many are going to impact the poorer communities. If they are to be moved for the bigger picture, then it's got to be equitable, meaning they should be kept in the same community and they should come out, not bounce back, but they should bounce forward by having a relocation package that brings them up, as young people say, so they come up instead of just coming back. And lastly, and most importantly to me, it is producing a construction trade school. And those are the things, and building housing at all price points. You can't even use the word affordable housing anymore because it has such negative connotations. So I like to use the term housing at all price points. So those are some of the things that we're working on.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
That sounds great. I just have one more question. So looking at some of the things that you have seen in terms of how Houston has developed and the fact that much of Texas has decided to forego zoning requirements, do you think, what policies do you think are shaping, or policy that you think can be, I guess geared towards more equitable and sustainable development for all to benefit? And this is a two-part question. And do you think that some of the way Texas has developed in terms of kind of it going its own way, developing its own grid, has in the long term hurt Texas?
Well, we saw in the short term that it hurt Texas during the freeze. See, we already had that freeze back in 2011, and they were warned what they needed to do to upgrade the grid. They didn't do it. They didn't make the investments, and people died, literally died, because they didn't do that. And once again, they're playing funny with the Hurricane Harvey money and cutting out Houston and Harris County that took the brunt of Hurricane Harvey in terms of the rain that fell on us for 3.5 days. They didn't give us not a dime in that money. And it's almost unbelievable. So Houston basically is known for not being an unzoned city. It's developer friendly and it's a free market city. And the only way that we can prosper in this city is we have to own the land. Mm-hmm. Land, again, is sacrosanct, is holy in Texas. And it's something that we have to get a hold of. Now the ironic thing about it is why there is no zoning in Houston is the very people who supported the anti-zoning movement in Houston are people who made their wealth doing master plan communities around Houston.
Okay, we definitely see the connection with that, brother.
Wow. Yeah, I looked at Houston, and I think it's fascinating how, as a planner, I came from a very litigious state, and you had to jump through a lot of hoops in Southern California. However, it obviously did not impede the population, since there's 40 million people in the state of California. So I think it would be really interesting to see if there's some midway point that Houston can go in terms of looking at California as a case study, looking at some of its past errors, and hopefully plan better with policies that are equitable and keep all of Houstonians and all of Texans in mind in the future. And we thank you so much.
Yes. I thank you. A lot of California people moving to Texas.
They are.
But the thing about it is part of the Great Migration is that a lot of people from Louisiana, Texas, and the South moved out there, particularly during World War II, to be involved in the wartime industries and to find the promised land in the Golden State. So welcome back to Texas, y'all.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Well, I thank you both for having this wonderful conversation. And we're going to pause for announcement for our sponsors. But thank you, Sister Nina, for bringing on brother Abdul so that we could talk about this urban planning conversation that's definitely needed to be had. You have a great night, Sister Nina.
Thank you. You do the same.
Thank you. Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. When we return, we will again be joined by Brother Abdul Haleem Muhammad to discuss the Florida Department of Education's proposed changes to their civics and history curriculum. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call Radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button, or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
As educational institutions make revisionist changes to civics and history curriculum, the new paradigm is sure to impact the mind of Black and Latino children. Joining us to give insight on this subject is Brother Abdul Haleem. How you doing today, brother?
I'm well, thank you, and I'm glad to be back.
Yes, sir. So, why is the Florida Department of Education making such changes to its curriculum?
It's part of a national movement, which is against what they call critical race theory, which simply is to say that they want to make little Johnny and Mary, their white children, feel guilty about the racist past and inequitable past of America. And so they are changing the curriculum, once again, to whitewash the history, just like we just found out about the Tulsa massacre and all the other massacres that took place, particularly post-Reconstruction and during the 20th century. So they're trying to spare their children the guilt that they should feel and must feel because of the injustice done to darker people and even their own poor whites in this country.
Wow. Yes, sir. That's definitely a very interesting take. And, what kind of impact would such curriculum changes have on the minds of Black and Latino children in public schools?
Well, what it'll do, once again, it's going to reinforce Black inferiority, and it's going to promote white superiority. And so we must do what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said. We've got to take up the 21st century challenge and take on a new educational paradigm. And that's based upon the foundation laid by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad in really establishing school choice when he went to jail for establishing the University of Islam in the 30s, as taught to him by Master Fard Muhammad, our savior. And so we've got to have an education that makes us want to do for self. The educational paradigm that we're operating with right now, particularly in the scheduling and also its curriculum, really comes out of the agrarian age when most people were farmers. And it is still based upon what you would call Fordism or industrial age, where it seems like we're preparing students to put screws and nuts in widgets, like in a factory assembly line, instead of the information age. And this was proved during this COVID-19 pandemic, where children had to do remote learning. We see how difficult it was because in many cases, many communities did not have high-speed internet, didn't have access to pads and computers. And so we were completely caught flat-footed in terms of education, its curriculum, and carrying it out.
Wow. So you mentioned that this is, that the way that the school system is structured is pretty much linked to the downfall of Black and Latino children, because the way that they have everything structured, it leads them down a bad path. So is this part of a larger national effort to eliminate historical controversy and critical points of view in public education?
Yes, once again, it's to teach blind patriotic jingoism, to make people blindly patriotic, not to, I'm the beneficiary of the three types of educational institutions: private school, parochial school, I went to Catholic school, and also public school. But the one thing that I had was good teachers in each one of those institutions that didn't teach me what to think by rote. They taught me how to think. And so that is the beautiful thing. And then when we look at the fact that many immigrants come here and they're sat in that same kind of educational environment, Brother Tariq, but yet they prosper. How? Because they're taken home and taught their culture, their folkways, their norms, their values, their attitudes. So we must set up, if nothing else, after school programs, Saturday school programs, and really in truth, we got to build our own schools because our HBCUs produce 75% of all of our PhDs, 75% of our Black veterinarians, 50% of Black pharmacists, 75% of our Black military officers, 50% of all Black attorneys. I can go on and 50% of all Black engineers. We need to strengthen our own educational system from pre-K all the way through PhD so we can get up and do something for ourselves instead of going looking for a job from the very people who don't have enough jobs for their own people.
That's right. Absolutely. And, you spoke on Don Elijah Muhammad's education program. Could you give the audience a little bit more information on that as well?
Well, absolutely. They can go to the Muhammad University of Islam, which is our national school there in Chicago. And we have many Muhammad University of Islam schools throughout the country and affiliated schools. And so we just believe in homeschooling. We believe in having our children to have an education that teaches them the knowledge of self, the knowledge of God, the knowledge of others, and to prepare them for the future. I just interviewed on my radio program a young sister by the name of Qudisa Muhammad out of Houston, who graduated high school at 16 years old and is a junior in college now. And when she finishes, she'll be able to finish her PhD literally before she's 21 years old, which is really how we should do it instead of spending a whole bunch of money, a whole bunch of time getting a PhD, which some cases means a pretty heavy dude, or it might mean, that we're really pretty broke with all the student loans that we have. So I just think that we have to have a whole nother mindset when it comes to an educational process that makes us nation builders and nation sustainers, and not people who look to others to do for us what we can and must do for ourselves.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. And, what would be a more effective way of teaching civics education and history to Black, Latino, and other non-white students? You kind of mentioned it a little bit with obviously doing for self and creating our own schools, but is there any more that you could add to that?
Well, you have to teach the truth. You have to teach the truth, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is the greatest nation on earth, bar none. Great does not mean good. Again, if you study language, you understand great does not mean good, but it is indeed the greatest nation on earth. And we need to teach the history of what happened to the indigenous people that were on this continent. Well, how did this country get built when they went and brought us over here from Africa? We didn't come here slave, we were enslaved. And what we suffered here, and what poor whites suffered in this country, and how we are where we are right now. We can't live in this American myth of American exceptionalism. We got to understand that George Mason, one of the founding fathers of this country, who did not sign the Constitution, even though he was at the Constitutional Convention, said that nations cannot be punished in the hereafter. They must be punished in this world. And he said, national sins beget national calamities. And believe it or not, he was the largest slaveholder at the Constitutional Convention. And he really was angry with his fellow Constitutional Convention participants because they were making a second compromise on slavery, on the importation of slaves. He was against a strong central government. That he was never for the Constitution, yet he was angry about the compromise they made over slavery, because he knew, like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, that one day we would become a trouble-making species of property.
Wow. So you speak on a lot of history here, and we know that there is a lot of proof and evidence of history being altered. So where are the harmful effects of whitewashing history?
When Caucasian people find out what they did, they'll suffer from guilt. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan teaches us in the self-improvement series that guilt and fear restrict. And if we don't understand that we weren't always docile slaves, there were over 500 slave rebellions And in part, that's the reason why there is a Second Amendment for them to have a well-armed militia. It's because slaves were uprising and killing folk, and they needed to be able to assemble their slave patrols and to put down these insurrections and these rebellions. But we need to know the history. We need to know the history. And it's important that be done, and it be done as soon as possible, because this once they find out the truth, and once we find out the truth, it results in anger. And we begin to hate and be very angry until we settle into the understanding of what that knowledge is that has been hidden from us, like the Tulsa massacre, like the massacre of Wilmington, North Carolina of 1898, which was the only successful coup d'etat of an American city on American soil. That took place. What happened on January 6th is what actually happened in Wilmington, North Carolina in November 10th and 11th, 1898. And so there's so many of those racial massacres that took place across this country that once we learn these things, we can fix it. But if we don't know, we can't fix what we don't know.
That's right. That's right. And why do you think they would want to hide history of, successful Black towns? Why would they want to hide that from Black people?
Well, to keep us dependent. If you get 1.5 to nearly $2 trillion out the economy, but you're not a producer but a consumer,
right,
then you're nothing but a host for a bunch of bloodsuckers to suck your economic blood. So our communities are not communities; they're colonies. Wow. Where you come and you have some Black titular leaders, figurehead leaders that appear to have power, but the truth of the matter is we've got everybody that ever comes to America setting up shop. If we're so poor, why do people come and set up shop in our communities? Because we're not doing for self, as the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad told us to do. And so others are benefiting from our lack of productivity, and they are taking money out of our community, building their own communities. And we sit here begging at the door, waiting for Mr. Biden to send down a stimulus check or to fix the things in Tulsa, when really our forefathers showed us the way in Tulsa, and 25 to 27 Black towns there in Oklahoma were already established when Oklahoma became a state. So we have the blueprint during Reconstruction. We know without real government funding and help that we can do some things, but we need to get up now and do it for ourselves. We have the qualified men and women, Tariq, to do what we need to do for ourselves. The question is, when will we unite, put aside our differences, and work in operational unity, which is unity without uniformity?
That's right. That's right. Unity without uniformity. Well said, brother. So just a last question here to end off on, and I thank you again for your time for joining us. When will America ever truthfully own up to its past when it comes to slavery and the creation of America?
Well, unfortunately, I think the way we're going, the way this country is split right now, we're heading towards civil war. And the truth of the matter is that I don't think they'll ever accept the truth of what was done to us and how we built this country. And so that is putting them in the bullseye of God's judgment, and his Christ and the Mahdi is going to bring about justice for us, whether we want it or not. And so integration, assimilation, and accommodation is not going to work. We're going to wind up in the separation, reparations, and repatriation in the very near future.
That's right, brother, in the very near future. Well, I thank you again for joining us today and taking the time out to answer those questions. It was a lot of valuable information to myself, and I'm sure to the audience as well. So thank you again, brother, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Brother Tariq.
Thank you. Have a good night. Let us pause for announcements from our sponsors. And when we return, Netfa Freeman will give us insight on President Biden's recent comments on the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa race riots and his administration's policies towards Africa. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Asiatic Minds. Online education. Helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Classes begin September 1st. To enroll, visit AsiaticMinds.com.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's final call cover story headline reads, "The battle in the sky is near." For 90 years, the Nation of Islam was mocked and ridiculed for its teachings on the mother plane and its aim and purpose. Now the government admits these UFOs are real, vindicating what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has warned of and prophesied. This FCM volume number 35 edition middle page article is a message by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan entitled "The Will, the Great Mother Plane, the Power of the Will to Destroy." To read more, subscribe to finalcalldigital.com and tune in to the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the nnvnews.com Final Call Cover Report.
Please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.
President Biden, the first U.S. president to make public comments, spoke at the 100th anniversary commemoration of the Tulsa Race Massacre.
The events we speak of today took place 100 years ago, and yet I'm the first president in 100 years ever to come to Tulsa. And I say that not as a compliment about me, but to think about it. 100 years and the first president to be here during that entire time. And in this place, in this ground, to acknowledge the truth of what took place here. For much too long, the history of what took place here was told in silence, cloaked in darkness. But just because history is silent, it doesn't mean that it did not take place.
Joining us to speak on this subject is Netfa Freeman with Black Alliance for Peace. Greetings, brother. How you doing today?
Sorry about that. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem, sir. Yes, sir. It's great having you on, my brother. Well, let's jump right into it. President Biden spoke in Tulsa, Oklahoma on the 100th anniversary commemoration of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Why has Biden been the first U.S. president to recognize the massacre and make public comments?
Mm-hmm. The short answer is straight up political opportunism. I think there's a number of factors that go into this opportunity that give them, to make them compelling to go do this. One is that Tulsa in particular has been raised up because people know it as, and it's been lifted up as Black Wall Street. And then, there's a number of things we could say about that in terms of why that's so important to African people or Black people, being lifted up as self-sufficient and all that. There's some myths there, but that's besides the point. The point is that also we're in a time of economic crisis of the United States. The United States is leading around the world. And so what some of us refer to as the race to the bottom. And in that we see uprisings like what a lot of us refer to the George Floyd uprisings, that people see a combination of both the repressive state apparatus, the police coming into our colonized communities, and also the neoliberalism, the inability of this economy to satisfy the needs of working class people. And so right now, the state is trying to play damage control and is trying to do everything to relegate our concerns as oppressed people to strictly race and not deal with the intersections of class in that aspect. And so they're playing an identity politics game where they want to feign a consideration for the concerns that have emerged over the last few years, well, for a long time now, around the police repression that manifests itself particularly on the race level, but also they can't allow us to see that the intersections of that with class and the natural or inherent fascist nature of capitalism. So a lot of this is also to reduce white supremacy to these more crude manifestations, like we see the people storming the Capitol and those kind of things. They'll blame Trump as being a white supremacist, but in fact, the United States as a settler colony, as a settler colonialism, as a system that's dependent on 3 pillars of white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy. It's a system that persists. They can't afford for the movement to embrace that idea. So they're on a PR campaign. So that's what makes them do this.
Wow, that was a heavy take and some heavy truths to reflect on. And speaking on truths, in Biden's speech, he said, only with truth can come healing and justice and repair. So as a member of Black Alliance for Peace, do you feel Biden is placating to the aspirations of Black people?
I mean, he definitely is. I mean, there's no, Kwame Ture, his Stokely Carmichael used to say capitalism and people that are capitalists don't lie some of the time. They lie all the time. So it's no way that they can even be telling the truth. As even I think the brother Muhammad in the segment before talked about the number of massacres that take place. So he's only talking about Tulsa. And because, like I said, that's emerged as a more prominent one. But there's, like you said, Wilmington, North Carolina. There's Rosewood that a lot of people know of. There's Arkansas, Elaine, Arkansas. There's different things. We also have to remember that there are even some that are not relegated to the South and then more contemporary. For example, the MOVE bombing in Philadelphia. That should be considered a massacre that killed all 11 people, 4 or 5 of them children in that house, and then destroyed the whole square city block. We also need to know that, and this is the truth that they can't tell, it's whitewashing it, is that they've committed the tantamount to the same thing against whole countries. They decimated Libya. Right. Biden was the vice president when they did that. And right now they're manipulating what's happening on the ground and trying to play politics so they can control the oil and the wealth and the markets of Libya and the whole continent of Africa. So when they talk about, the truth, they're being hypocritical, they're being disingenuous, and they have no intention of telling the truth to people.
That's right. And, that's interesting because, like you said, there's many more race massacres that they have committed, but yet they focus on Tulsa because, like you said, it's becoming a prominent one to speak on. And like you even mentioned before, this could be a political stunt that could be going on. And, Biden blamed the racist white mob for the Black Wall Street massacre, but never mentioned the U.S. government's role and the U.S. bombs that flew overhead. Is Biden whitewashing the U.S. government's role in working to destroying Black people and Black organizations? Is his rhetoric racist, revisionist history?
Right. And like we said, it has to do that. It's not even just revisionist history. It's revising the present right now. And so we're seeing that right now we live in the United States is a serious, what we call national security state with all forms of surveilling people. They're maligning, the movement of Black Lives Matter movement as the Black identity extremist. There's no talk about that. They're giving more arms, transferring arms from the Department of Department of Defense to localized police forces under Biden. Just as short, how many months has it been? 6 months in the presidency, and that transfer of what's known as the 1033 program, that transfers equipment from the military to local police forces has seen an increase of those transfer of equipment, a lot of it weapons, not all of it is weapons, but this to be used against our communities than all of the quarters of the previous presidencies, or at least the Trump presidency. And so, this whitewashing has to take place because what it is, it's a PR campaign what that they embark on, while at the same time, when we're not paying attention, they're shoring up all of the pillars of fascism that they need in order to maintain the system, to maintain this unsustainable system. And one of them is the media. And we have to remember, media is a component of fascism, using media to confuse people and to propagate things. And it's to make us also embrace an Americanism, as we would say. Malcolm called it Americanism, that is actually implicitly white supremacist and also confines our thinking and makes us believe our interests are bound up with the same interest of the rulers of the United States, when in fact we have interests that are aligned with the working class people in our communities, and also internationally, the Black and brown people struggling in other places around the world.
Man, wow. And so let's shift the conversation to internationally now, excuse me, because you did mention about the massacres that went on in Libya when he was vice president at the time. So as Palestinians live under apartheid, Biden has given his unwavering allegiance to the Zionist Israel. When it comes to Haitians, he said, I can say quite clearly, don't come over. What does this say about Biden's pervasiveness and the implications of his policy toward oppressed people?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it says a lot. I mean, we really can't. It's hard not to talk about this administration, not even just the administration. It's really not just about Biden. It's about the presidency, because a prerequisite for becoming the president of the United States is to be a Democrat or Republican, and it's also to be able to bomb children in another country. If you can't do that, you're not going to be president of the United States. It's that simple. They're going to do everything they can. And so when it comes to Palestine, they talk, do one thing with the left hand and do something else with the right hand. They've issued $5 million, I think, to help with the rebuilding or recovery efforts to Palestinians in Gaza. But at the same time, they approve $750 million to give more weapons to Israel. And so this is the hypocrisy we see. Biden's talking about the Haitians. We don't tell them not to come over here. Well, the Haitians on the street, and what we don't get with the media here, are saying, U.S. get out of Haiti. And so that, the white supremacy involved in that is that the United States, along with Brazil and France and the OAS and the United Nations, are controlling what's happening in Haiti. It's not just about the dictator Jovenel Moïse, but Jovenel Moïse maintains power because they support him, and that he grants them unfettered access to what Haiti has to offer in terms of the exploiting the country.
Wow. Thank you for that. Thank you for the intake, or thank you for those takes, my brother. That was some good insight on the information. So where can we go to reach out to your organization?
BlackAllianceForPeace.com is the website. I'm a member of Pan-African Community Action, which is a member of Black Alliance for Peace, and PACApower.org is Pan-African Community Action's website. And I'm on Twitter, Netfa, Blacks for Peace is Black Alliance for Peace Twitter.
All right. Well, thank you again, brother, for taking the time out to join us tonight. Really do appreciate your takes and your input on these topics. Thank you again, and you have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today and tuning in to National Network View. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News. This is Tariq X with National Network View News. I wish you all peace, blessings, and well-being. Good night.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.